Keystone Sports Network.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Keystone Kickoff Show. I am Jim Galanti, along with Mike Villagrana, Executive Director at Happy Valley United, Chris Buchignani, the host of the obligatory pregame show. Guys, this is our special coaches edition of our show. Chris, have you ever seen anything as crazy as what's going on with this Penn State coaching search?
Well, what's happening down in Oxford, Mississippi, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, is giving it a run for its money. But the fact that they are happening concurrently, to me, is evidence that despite all the strip mining of the substance and soul out of college football over the years, it is still by far the best sport on earth.
It is, but this is a situation where, like you said, I think the default was Ole Miss, LSU. That was the craziest thing going on. And then Pat Kraft said, hold my beer.
Beer, no doubt.
So it's just for, full disclosure, it's Tuesday night. It's 6:45. We appear to be getting the note that Kalani Sitake is out. BYU apparently got the money together. The crumble cookies money was enough. They were able to match Penn State or surpass Penn State's offer. Mike, here among the fans, it's craziness following this. I can't imagine what it must be like inside the building.
Well, inside the building, when I've gone through there, Coach T, he gave the staff off until tomorrow, signing day with tomorrow. So, it's been pretty quiet, to be honest. I think everybody that's usually in the office is probably just like us, just like regular people looking on Twitter and seeing what's happening. And then, it's like, okay, so do I have a connection to that school where that coach is? So let me reach out to that guy or this guy. It's just it's fun to be a fly on the wall, to be honest. I've told my closest friends that aren't even in this space at all. I said that are like big college fans, but they don't know this world. And I've told them, I said, I think we're going through the craziest time of college football that we will ever see. And I don't think it's going to get crazier from here, honestly, from all the different arms, like from the NIL, from the coaching contracts to everything, the portal, the calendar, everything. I don't think we're going to see another time like this. I think after this season, there's going to be so much reform that happens that this will be the craziest time of the year or of college football hirings ever. And we're right in the middle of it. A school that is not privy to this. Like, this is not what we do.
No, stability has been the identity of Penn State for 3/4 of a century, more or less. And here we are. You're right, Mike. This is going to produce some really interesting books in retrospect. The SCORE Act is going to the floor of the House of Representatives this week and is going to pass. Now, it will not get through the Senate in its current incarnation, but we'll be one step closer to federal legislation starting to put some guardrails on college sports. So you're right. It could go in that direction. And the one thing I don't want you guys or the audience to forget is there's still the rumor hanging out there that Steve Sarkisian might be ready to bolt to the NFL when that hiring cycle starts. So the insanity might not end with Penn State either.
No, it doesn't. And by the way, government intervention on something, what could possibly go wrong?
Right.
It works everywhere else. Now, I'm
not going to polarize the audience by bringing up the Reagan quote, but you know what it is, Jim, and folks can go look it up.
Let's move on. Let's get back to the football portion of our show. And all along, the narrative, the national narrative, I think, has not been the most accurate or the most well thought out. I'll put it that way.
Go figure.
Because, yeah. And, I think we have an athletic director who has been criticized nationally. So what is Penn State doing? And Pat Kraft could have all along had his guy. Okay. We don't know. Nobody knew what he was thinking, right, Mike? Because he was holding it so close to the vest. This Kalani Sitake conversation over the last couple days is the first time I think it's been credible talk about a specific candidate. And all the other ones was just conjecture, I think. This not the first guy that, yeah, you feel pretty confident. There was a conversation and there was negotiating going on.
For me, none of it's been real to me because it has been so close, tight, and Pat and the administration have done a really good job, keeping it close knit. But and so much that I'm lucky enough to be friends with some people that are in the national media that it's their job to know this stuff. And then if they're texting me asking, and I'm like, why the hell are you asking me? I don't know. You're supposed to tell me. It's a very close to the chest search. And I think to bring back up what I said at the beginning, this is the craziest time of college football offseason that you're ever going to see, I think. And so you combine that with the calendar, you combine that with the search, and you combine that with the appetite from social media and the fans wanting it now. I get that, but what if Pat Kraft has this plan and he's executing this plan, and within this plan, in the middle of it, everybody's getting these hires, and now social media is getting antsy. Now the fans are getting antsy, right? But maybe he has a plan and he still has a big dog that you guys want, that the audience want, the fans want, and that happens. And then I think it's just we're riding this roller coaster right now, and it's fun. For me, it's fun.
Well, I think it is reaching a point. I always felt during the regular season that wasn't the time to hire someone. It was after the regular season ended. That's when you could name a coach. That was the timing. And lo and behold, you saw, all the other programs. This is when they made their hire. Right after the regular season ends Saturday, all of a sudden Sunday, boom, boom, boom. Coach after coach after coach was named in all the openings except at Penn State. So, Chris, at that point, if Kalani Sitake was the choice of Pat all along, the timing seems to have fit correctly. It was all okay. But now, as we're finding out, no, it's not going to be Sitake. Where does that leave the program now? And where all this time we always thought, hey, Pat Kraft could have his guy. He's just not telling us who it is. Do we still feel that way?
It's a harder sell this evening than it was previously, and it was a tougher sell yesterday than it was any time before. Because, to Mike's point, and I will echo it, I think they have done a tremendous job keeping a lid on this thing the entire time. Real information has just not leaked out. And to the point that the national guys don't know it, the local guys don't know it. We're all casting about in the dark, and that's just fine with me, frankly. From a fan's perspective, I want them to keep a tight grip on the information and keep it in a tightly closed circle. But it feels like at the very end here, the veil dropped. The reason why we feel pretty confident that Sitake is staying at BYU, which I have to admit, as intrigued as I was with him as a candidate, all the reasons I love college football best, my heart kind of loves that dude is sticking at his alma mater. There's a part of me that likes that. The reason why we believe it's true is because Pete Thamel's reporting it. And one thing that the big national guys, Thamel, Nakos, etc., have not done through any part of this process is definitively reported Penn State is in on this guy and they think they're close. And then that happened with Sitake. And so the veil dropped a little bit. And that gave us the first real insight into the process that has been opaque for nearly 2 months now. And I don't know that it was the most flattering look behind the curtain. And it definitely does not lend credence to the idea that there's a playoff coach who's in the pot of gold waiting at the end of the rainbow. I mean, I don't discount that that's a possibility, and I want to be patient and just get to the end before I render judgment on the process. And even then, we won't really know for a few years until we see who gets hired. But I do think the notion that they've just kept this plan to pull Marcus Freeman or Kalen DeBoer or Urban Meyer out from behind the curtain at the end of the process is beginning to strain credulity more and more with each passing day.
It is. And, what's interesting with Satake, Mike, the more I looked at BYU and what he's been able to do there, I'm saying, yeah, this seems like a pretty good coach, but the culture thing, he's never coached east of the Rocky Mountains, and I did a little exercise. Earlier today, I took a look at the BYU roster. We're talking about 80, 90, 100 players. And there were only 4 players from east of the Rockies. And they were 2 guys from Georgia and 2 guys from Virginia out of, 100 or so players. So as much as we wanted to think, hey, Pat Kraft had his guy all along, and we were all just going to find out now, when we found out Satake was the guy that he was talking to, I think some of us question that fit. It's not questioning him as a coach, but it's just geographically, you wonder if a guy from the West should be the right guy for the Penn State job, Mike.
Yeah, and that's natural to do. I remember being at Mississippi State. It was my first time working the SEC under Joe Moorhead, and I had a year underneath Mike Leach at the time. So I had 3 solid years in the SEC, and I remember Harsin getting hired from Boise State to Auburn, and I'm like, okay. And then I'm looking at the staff. I'm looking at his background, and there's 0 Southeastern ties. Like, not just him, but his entire staff. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a struggle. If I had a bet, this is not going to work. And that's kind of like the same feel I got when I heard Satake. I looked at his staff, and I'm like, okay, this guy is a ball coach. Anybody you talk to, anybody is going to say this guy can develop players. He can coach his butt off. He is a phenomenal human being. Like, all that stuff checks out. But the big thing to me is having ties and roots in the region, because when the Harsin thing went down, the Southeast, there was the NIL before the NIL. But everything is super competitive now between the Big Ten and the Southeast Conference. Like, it's all the same. It's super competitive. Be out in front. Have connections. Having the connections is huge to be out in front of things. So that's what made me kind of like second guess the hire. Would it work? Maybe, but right off the foot, I'm just thinking, man, the guy doesn't have any ties to this region, and anybody that knows this region, you have to have ties to go into Philly. That's why Deion Barnes is so valuable. He coached in Philly in the inner city schools. Like, Satake, are you going to be able to walk in to Ematep and talk to those guys and sway them to have us get their player versus another school? Like, that stuff, that takes time, relationships, and I just didn't see it at the beginning. And obviously people can prove you wrong in there, but right off the hoof, that concerned me.
And Jim, we ought not lose track of the way the calendar works against a coach coming in with that situation, because I've used this line a couple of times now, and I really think that it's true. I think that Bill O'Brien walked into a more favorable, stable situation in January of 2012 than the head coach coming to Penn State in 2025 will be. Because remember, when Bill got hired, the free report and the sanctions were 6 months off. So at the very least, he could talk to guys who were on his football team, know who they were, and have a chance to build a relationship with them, get them into his strength and conditioning program, and go through spring ball with that team. Meanwhile, this guy, whoever it is going to have to immediately re-recruit the roster, deal with, whatever you can salvage out of this class of 2026. And don't forget, I do think we are going to see high school recruits sign on the dotted line with one school in December and be right into the transfer portal in January to go somewhere else because of all the coaching movement that's happened. So don't completely write off the high school class of 26, but that's all stuff that will be dropped into the lap of the next coach. And if you are, in addition to that, trying to assemble a staff, learning an entirely new region of the country and coming onto the recruiting trail completely sight unseen, as you know, of course, you're going to have James down at Virginia Tech, who has all the built-in advantages and knowledge of your recruiting footprint. But don't forget, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan, frankly, Oregon and USC, they maybe know the recruiting footprint of Penn State better than Kalani Sitake would. So that concerned me. That was the biggest red flag for me, as somebody who actually likes him a lot in terms of who he is as a person and as a coach.
Well, and other competitors, they'll use that against you. Especially in the short term, you have no shot, basically, right? Because those people that have those connections or whatever, regardless if it's bogus or not, at least they have that connection with the kid initially to sway that very volatile recruit. So that's tough, and I agree with Chris.
And speaking of recruits, Mike, this is commitment week. Commitment day's tomorrow. There's no chance for Penn State to have a normal recruiting day without a coach. I mean, are the coaches, is Terry and the staff right now talking to anybody, still trying to get guys to sign on the dotted line?
Yeah, I mean, the commitments that we have right now, I think it was 5 as of today, earlier today. And that's just part of it. But to me, this kind of goes with the trend that I think where high school recruiting is going. It's becoming lesser valuable than retainment of your own roster and then portal to plug gaps because of how everything's getting sped up and coaches don't have 4 or 5 years to recruit a whole cycle. It's about portal and winning now. So you're only going to get a return on your investment on a lot of these guys most of the time on high school kids. It takes a year or two at least to get some type of return on them. So to me, I think Pat's looking at that like, okay, that's fine. We can get through this season. We can get through this recruiting cycle because what it's about, let's retain this roster because we have a really good, healthy, young, and middle of the road not middle of the road, but middle roster of veterans that are still developing that are going to be huge role players for us. So I think that's number one, and then it's portal. So who can we retain, and then based off of who we retain, let's plug from there.
Let me throw this out to you guys. This was something that Landon and I kind of came up with on the fly on the live stream we did earlier today. There are 105 roster spots available to Penn State. There's nothing that says you got to fill 105 spots. And Mike, when you talk about roster retention, I said one thing that could work in Penn State's favor is if just because of the math, we're looking at this and saying we're not just going to throw warm bodies in to fill roster spots. You got to divide that revenue share number regardless. Maybe Penn State will be in a position because they'll just have a lower number of total guys on the roster that they can make a little bit more lucrative offer to some of the guys who are on the team right now to say, hey, when the dust finally settles on this thing, here's our head coach. Take your 5 days, meet with them, and we can make you a better financial offer than a lot of the other schools that are trying to sway you away. You can stay with what you're familiar with here at Penn State. You can have some stability. Hopefully the new guy makes a compelling sales pitch to stick around. And by the way, here's a few extra bucks to sweeten the deal.
And also what that does, Mike, is you transfer the important date to get a coach in. Penn State essentially has punted on the 26 recruiting commitment day, which is tomorrow. The next important day is until the first week of January, which is when the portal opens. So I would think the sales pitch now to the current players is like, Chris said, stick around, find out who the new guy's going to be, talk to the new guy. And yes, financially, Penn State, as a blue blood, should be in position to have a good amount of money to spend on the team and perhaps fewer players to spend it on, which could work out well for some of the current players.
Yeah, and I think that's what's going on right now. I think they're strategizing. All right, the players that they want to present to the new head coach that will be able to say, hey, here's your incentive. Here's what we wanted to keep you. And that should just be icing on the cake from when the coach comes in and his pitch. Now, I think the pitch is huge. Now, if that's a huge thing now, like that pitch is big. If these guys sniff BS, like they're going to probably be gone. Like, but if they get some buy-in, then they could. But that's a slippery slope. We'll see. That's why Terry is an awesome option right now at this point.
Mike is like a mind reader. I was about to say, Jim, I'm only going to do this once, but I got to do it once. If only, thinking about all the problems we just laid out, there were a candidate available to us who was familiar with the recruiting footprint, who knew these guys on the roster and could kind of preempt the need to form a relationship, and had maybe, I don't know, given us some evidence that he could actually successfully coach a team to wins at Penn State. If there were a dream candidate like that available, wouldn't it make Pat Kraft's job so much easier?
You want to field that one, Mike?
Well, I think all three of us, since our last show at Buffalo Wild Wings, we said the same thing. I mean, Chris had a great take. I mean, made me want to jump through the wall with Terry, even though before I'm ready to jump through the wall for Terry. I mean, it makes sense. It does for right now where we're at. I don't understand what the splash would be, but I think at this point, we can be hopeful. If it's not Terry, it's somebody that is in the playoffs right now. So or in a conference championship game. So maybe after next week, because the next important date is the portal, January 2nd. It opens up, and that recruiting is already happening, right? So that you can't hire a coach January 1 and expect portal results. Like, I think if you hire a coach after next week, then I think we could be in a solid position. Hence the process and the people that the head coach brings in.
Chris, is Terry a possibility? Personally, my take on it was if they were going to hire Terry, it would have happened already. It would have, if latest would be like right now after that last regular season game. If it's not Terry by now, it's probably not Terry.
I think that's probably a safe assumption. Although we are in such uncharted territory, Jim, all things are possible. We have multiple times thought we had the rabbit in the snare and came up empty, I believe. Or at least that's been the perception that's been circulated online, and definitely seems to have been the case with Kalani Sitake, because like I said, the veil dropped on that one. We get the national reporters confirming that Penn State was hot and heavy into that bidding war. So I don't rule out anything. And I mean, this thing has gone so far afield. I don't want to speculate too much, but I think anything is on the table right now, up to and including folks in the administration who are above Pat Kraft's pay grade getting involved. So who knows?
I know
what I would do if I were president of Penn State, Jim, and we'll just leave it at that. Folks can infer.
You might step in on this discussion.
You said that. I couldn't possibly comment.
I will say it. Mike, I'm curious, and I don't know if you have much take on this, but how about where the players are right now in all of this? I'm sure they don't know. They haven't been told, it's not some secret that Pat has shared with them, but what is being shared with them? What is being told to them? And how are they feeling right now?
I don't think too much communication has been told to them, like what way they're going or not. I think, Pat Kraft and administration should be supporters of Terry and the players as they prep for the announcement of the bowl game, and then they go from there. But, I think naturally these kids are online, they're on social media, they're seeing all this talk, and now they're talking to their agents, talking to their families. So as time goes on, the answer those guys get naturally, right? Like that's just natural. But I think we just need to trust it. The fact that we did make the bowl game, which is or got that sixth win to get to a bowl game, is big with the retention and with these players. So I think the vibe is good. It's great, honestly. It's good, but there is starting to get some antsiness, right? You'll see the Tony Rojas's of the world tweet out, and that stuff, and the Mari Campbells, like they're going to do stuff that you see that you just never have seen since the time they've been at Penn State, that makes you think like, all right, what's going on? This and that. They're just getting antsy. They're 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, and they're just getting antsy, and don't think that Coach Franklin isn't plugging away through the background on this stuff. So that's why it's like Pat has a plan. We got to trust that, but like that stuff is happening as we talk right now.
Chris, all right. Sataki was a name that no one had talked about at all until a couple days ago. So who knows what that next name will be?
Mm-hmm.
But why should that stop us from some conjecture? Who's still out there? What direction would you like to see Pat go?
Well, obviously, the direction I'd love to see him go is just the answer's in the building as far as I'm concerned. There are some other options I'm interested in. Folks we talked about before, Jim, I think you and I are alone with just a few other folks on Manny Diaz Island. But it may be only due to the ridiculous tiebreakers of the ACC, which is not a serious conference, that he is coaching in a conference championship game. But nevertheless, the man is coaching Duke football in the ACC championship game. And hilariously, he was fired by Miami, and the Hurricanes have still not made it to that game since, but he's got Duke playing in that game. I like Manny as an option. He does not seem to be drawing a lot of attention. Brian Hartline, on that front, things have been conspicuously quiet. He was supposedly in the mix at Kentucky, but they pulled the trigger on Will Stein very quickly, to the point that I don't really believe there was a whole lot of meaningful communication between Kentucky and Brian Hartline's camp. And even here, Bob Chesney, speaking of Manny Diaz, could pull a Manny Diaz as when he signed with Pat Kraft, by the way, as the athletic director at Temple, and was there for 2 weeks. And then he was gone to Miami. Bob Chesney has not signed his contract yet. So some of the old names may bubble back up here.
Well, that's what I wondered. What my first reaction when Chesney we got word out that he was going to take the UCLA job, the first thought was, oops, well, Penn State must have their guy.
Yeah.
Because Chesney, who was a name that was often mentioned, he was off to UCLA. Well, guess what? Maybe not finalized. So, Mike, I think there's still the case, like you said, that after this week of conference championship games, we might see a name pop up. And by the way, Chesney is coaching in a conference championship game. So is Manny Diaz, as you mentioned, Chris. And so is Brian Hartline. They're all with teams playing in the conference championship game. So there is logic that if Pat had, multiple guys out there, not just Sataki, one of them might be coaching in a conference championship game.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of Chris with the Terry. I think Terry is the guy. That's who I'd want right now. just because of everything that we've already talked about, right? So that's already known. That's who I would like. But after Terry, like it would be Marcus Freeman, it would be Hartline, it'd be DeBoer. Those would be the three to me that I think if Pat was able to make a move on those three guys, that I think the fan base would. If I think out of all those guys, if he's able to pull Freeman, I
All's
mean,
forgiven.
Yes.
they'll build a statue of Pat.
Yeah.
They'll build a statue because I think Freeman is one of the best coaches in the country, young coaches. Regardless, I think that guy can coach his butt off anywhere he's at. I think he can recruit his butt off wherever he's at. I think he manages an organization as well as anybody else for a young guy. So I really like Marcus Freeman. Next would be Hartline because I know that guy can recruit his butt off. Like we're going to be recruiting against Coach Franklin.
Right.
So I feel good about a Hartline recruiting against a Coach Franklin. Now, and that's how I kind of like look at it when I'm looking at these like head coaching jobs. Like, I know how Coach Franklin recruits. I know how he is in a head coach meeting with these recruits and their parents. Like, so that's kind of how I judge these guys. And the Hartline, that guy, I mean, look at his receiving core. Look at those guys he recruits from Texas, from all over. They're not just regional guys. Like, this guy can recruit. So I love that. And then DeBoer, I'm like okay with. I was never on the DeBoer train when he went to Alabama. I was like, yeah, it sounds good. Seems like a little bit of a reach, but he's proven it. He's proven he can win games. He's proven in-game management. He calls, obviously, from last week. Some of the gutsy calls that he made. If they don't convert on that 1-4 down, maybe we're not even talking about that guy. He might be canned by Alabama. But those are probably my top guys. I don't love Braum. I just don't love it. I don't love it from the standpoint if Braum is the guy then you go to that tier and then you're going to get compared. All right, is he better than Franklin? So then you're going to get all these comparisons and they look too similar. And it's like, did you really get a better guy? You know what I mean? So those are my guys. Freeman, Hartline, and DeBoer are all my guys that I would like if it's not Terry.
I will say that if you pull Marcus Freeman, Pat Kraft can have the last laugh and can eat out on the Penn State company card for the rest of his career because he will have not just landed the plane and gotten the big name that, as I was talking about with Landon earlier today, let's be honest, he basically promised everybody. I mean, he didn't promise it, but he did. Everybody went away from Pat's press conference 50 days ago thinking there's a big name at the end of this process. That's what he's telling me. Not only will he have fulfilled that, if he could somehow pull it off, but he will have kept everyone fooled, which will just be like an amazing accomplishment in this era of instant communication. I mean, to not have anything leak out will just be remarkable.
It would be. I don't see Marcus Freeman. I would love to have it happen. Sure. I just don't see it happening. I don't see him leaving a Notre Dame to come to Penn State.
For the same reasons I'm kind of happy Satake's staying at BYU. Kind of part of me wants him to stay at Notre Dame too.
But I think Satake is more BYU than Marcus Freeman is Notre Dame.
No question.
And now I've heard rumblings. I don't know what it means. I don't know what's legit, but I've heard that he's not that happy there. You guys know Notre Dame. It's different, especially when it comes to administration. Like it's not a normal there's a president, there's an AD. There is a lot of stuff there that goes in there. So
by the way, let me just throw this out there. Again, this is all fun conjecture. If we somehow at Penn State were able to bring in Marcus Freeman, it could be because Notre Dame ends up missing the playoffs. And think about this. If Notre Dame misses the playoffs, it will be because Miami kicked the crap out of Pitt worse than Notre Dame kicked the crap out of them. And that'll just make me happy.
We'll take just kicking the crap out of Pitt in and of itself is enough. But if it gets Penn State their next coach, and it's interesting, Mike, you mentioned about Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. Those are the same kind of things we're hearing about Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. Just ridiculous expectations there that may lead to it. But I'm also maybe I would be gladly wrong if either one of those guys, DeBoer or Freeman, somehow became available and became Penn State's next coach. Back here on planet reality, as far as I'm concerned, I still like, the other candidates. Everybody who listens to our show knows, I have a man crush on Manny Diaz. And I'm not looking so much at what he did at Duke as much as what he did here at Penn State and the relationships he formed while he was here, the work he did as a defensive coordinator, the respect he got from everyone. I'm looking at that. Brian Hartline, I think it was you, Mike, who gave, wonderful reason. The guy can recruit the crap out of things, and just I will take that as a coach. And, Bob Chesney, I love the idea of a local guy. And I know, lightning may not strike twice, like Curt Cignetti coming from James Madison and was the tremendous coach. Would Bob Chesney do the same thing? But the famous quote from Cignetti, I win. Look me up. Look it up. Chesney, he wins.
Jim,
Look
I know
it up.
the JMU connection makes it easy to compare Chesney and Curt Cignetti, but I think the better comparison, if Penn State were to make that hire to somehow kind of just pluck him from right out underneath UCLA's nose, is Ohio State hiring Jim Tressel, who was head coach at Youngstown State when they hired him. Because remember, they fired John Cooper, who was a guy who was consistently winning, 9-10 games a year and stockpiling NFL talent. I mean, just ridiculous teams that Ohio State had back in the 1990s. But he couldn't beat Michigan. And the administration started to feel like he was hitting up against his ceiling. And again, you coach in a place for long enough, and mutually the relationships start to fray. And they let him go. And a lot of people said, what are you doing? You've got this proven recruiter, 10-game winner, and you're settling for some guy from Division I AA. But they just found a guy who was an in-state guy who understood their footprint and who was a winner. And a few years later, they were playing for a national title and ended up winning it because of the worst pass interference call in the history of the sport of football.
I love that, Chris, because that time that you're talking about, I was living in Youngstown, Ohio.
Okay.
And the Trestles were a big Youngstown name, went to school with his daughters. And I grew up a Youngstown State Penguin fan. And those are the first games I went to. So I remember all of that. I remember going to Ohio State games during that time, during the Cooper's time. And because he didn't beat Michigan, they got worn out, and they said, we're done with this guy. And so, but when they finally let go of him, I think the fans were pretty happy, almost like eerily similar to like here, like when we let go of Coach Franklin and everybody's pretty happy. But then they hired Jim Tressel, who, I loved, obviously, but it didn't matter. I'm just a kid. And he kills it. He absolutely kills it. He has the structure. He has everything. So it could happen that way. It could happen that way if we go that route. But I just think Pat wants a splash, is from what I'm hearing.
Which I hate, by the way. I just could not care less about a splash. Now, if it's a splash with some substance, like Marcus Freeman, who has kind of earned the fact that he's a splash hire. Even Kalen DeBoer, I like DeBoer a lot. I think there's a lot to recommend him. But, you shouldn't turn your nose up at a guy like Hartline, who has been kind of up towards the top of my list through the whole process, just because he's not a splash hire. Because who cares? Who cares about this? Who's a splash hire?
Just remember, all of these guys, Marcus Freeman, when he was hired at Notre Dame, was not a splash hire.
Right.
Neither was Ryan Day. Neither was Dabo Sweeney. Neither was Kurt Signetti. None of those guys were splash hires. What they were the right guy.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the important thing.
That's
All
why
right.
I like the Stein hire at Kentucky.
Yeah, there's an example.
Yeah, I think he's a good fit, and he's uber talented from all accounts.
All right, guys. I need a last word, and I don't know if either one of you wants to do this. Y'all gave your conjecture. If everything fell right, if you were in charge, if you could make it happen. Now we're going to go back to the reality of, anyone want to predict who the next Penn State coach is going to be?
You want me to go first, Chris?
No, man. I'll let you think about it, because Jim, I'm not 100% sure. We're not living in a simulation here, so I am just going to go ahead and try and speak it into existence. Terry. There you got it.
All right, Mike, you can take your shot at it now.
I think it's going to be a mystery surprise.
Mystery candidate.
I think it's going to be.
Mike's got a little twinkle in his eye every time this mystery stuff comes up.
I think it's not going to be so much of a mystery, just with all the coverage. I want Terry in the worst way. I do, and Terry has a plan. He's planning it like he's ready to go as the full-time guy in this offseason. But if it isn't him, I think it's going to be somebody different, because I think Pat's working through this storm, this social media push storm. We don't have a guy. It's signing day tomorrow. It's everybody else signing their other guys. I think he's working through that because he has a plan. I feel confident in that, and I think we're going to be happy when it's all said and done. I'm glad the Sadaki thing died, because I just didn't think it was a good fit. But I think everybody's pretty confident that we're going to be okay. I think the people that I talk to, I think we feel pretty good about it. It's just all over the place, and in a time where we want to know answers, where other people are making decisions, it's tough. And you know what my hot take is on the hires on Sunday? Those guys will be looking for another job in 3 or 4 years.
I think that's right. I agree with that for sure. And Jim, let me add one other final word that has nothing to do with any of this nonsense we just discussed, and just should not be overshadowed in all this coaching search stuff. Man, am I so glad that Nick Singleton and Katron Allen got to go out the way they did against Rutgers, both setting significant marks. You know, Katron crossed the 4,000-yard career mark, and he has the best single-day rushing performance for a Nittany Lion since LJ back in 2002. And Nick Singleton eclipses 3 different Saquon Barkley-held career marks in his final regular season game. Those 2 guys together, and I wrote about this today in between all my podcast obligations for Happy Valley Connect. We're not going to see a duo like that for a long time again at Penn State or anywhere in college football. And to me, the career of those 2 and the way they carried themselves with such grace, and they were able to maintain a friendship and never got jealous of one another and congratulated each other for their accomplishments, and both finished their Penn State careers all over the program record books. That's why we care about this stuff. That's why we're all glued to Twitter and talking for 45 minutes about who the coach is. It's for the opportunity to see guys like that play. And I just don't want, in all the chaos of this coaching search, for us to lose perspective on how lucky we were for the last 4 years to be able to watch that tandem of backs wear the blue and white. Like, really cool stuff.
Chris, it was probably over 50 years ago that we had a tandem like this. Franco Harris and Lydell Mitchell.
No doubt.
You and I have talked about them. It'll probably be another 50 years.
And 50 years later, we're still talking about those guys. So we just lived through watching a pair of running backs that compare to them. So, man, don't take it for granted. Be appreciative for what we just lived through.
That was pretty special. Mike, it looked like you had one last note. I'll give you the last word.
No, I'm just appreciative to be kind of a fly on the wall with this whole thing with you guys. I talked to you earlier today. I was just like, I just think this is like a good time for us to jump on a call because it's just nuts right now. It is, and I think we all have a different perspective and lens on how things are going, which is pretty cool. And hopefully the audience agreed. But appreciate you guys, and hopefully we'll have an answer by, I'm gonna guess, Sunday night is when it's gonna happen.
I think we are going to see it right after the conference championship games. And you know what? When we do have a coach, let's the three of us get together and do this again.
Let's do it.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Make sure you check in with us next time on the Keystone Kickoff Show.
Keystone Sports Network.